Bonus Chapter 4, Before the Calamity. The Legend of Sunset Shimmer, Majora's Mask. By Ganondorf 8. December 11, 2017. Bonus Chapter 4, Before the Calamity. Note, normally, I don't do something like this before the chapter begins, but I felt it necessary to do so now because of recent events. I'm aware that the Champions Ballad DLC for The Legend of Zelda, Breath of the Wild was recently released and that certain events portrayed in it won't match up with what is seen here. That's because I wrote this before the DLC content became known to me, so do not inform me of any inconsistencies. Most people wouldn't take the contents within a book about a video game series as a serious issue, but then those same people didn't experience what I had been through by being forced into becoming a part of this video game. If Ganondorf had never brought me into that first adventure, I would have viewed the contents of the Hyrule Historia as nothing more than a fantasy epic designed to be engaging and appeal to die-hard fans like Rainbow Dash, for instance. For me, the opposite was true, and I saw it as a window into a world whose very existence had become integrated with my own being against my own free will. Each story I read exposed me to a world whose history had been stained with conflict ever since it was first created by the great goddesses. Despite their good intentions, they had systematically brought about the destruction of their creation simply because greed and the desire for power proved too much for people, resulting in them going to extreme lengths to lay their hands on the Triforce, that which had been left behind by the goddesses out of a sense of giving them hope. Despite measures being created to prevent anyone from acquiring it, it only took one person to effectively change everything. That one person being Ganondorf, who succeeded where others had failed, and claimed it. By all accounts, the fact that he succeeded was due to an unfortunate accident, but the fact of the matter is that he acquired the Triforce and used it to plunge Hyrule into a period of darkness where he ruled unopposed until a chosen few succeeded in banishing him. Many would call that an adventure of a lifetime, a classic struggle between good and evil, yet I saw it as the beginning of the end, as something was bound to go wrong eventually. I had already read about such instances where Ganondorf escaped from his imprisonment, to having survived his own execution only to be banished, but these were nothing compared to what was to come. My examples weren't part of the same timeline, but rather from branching timelines which resulted from the actions at the end of Ocarina of Time. The book referred to such an event as the Imprisoning War. 3 paths were created upon the conclusion of this war, with each leading down a path where it seemed like peace would prevail only to result in darkness consuming everything. Ganondorf was the source behind the darkness, though his actions alone didn't bring about destruction. No, the problems were already in place and he merely added to them. I remembered reading about events from 2 paths, so as I sat down and opened the book, I needed to look at the third path. Before looking at the new chapter which had been added to this edition of the Hyrule Historia, I decided to briefly look at a chapter that was dedicated to the aftermath of the events that occurred at the end of Ocarina of Time from each timeline. I ignored the first 2 paths as I had knowledge of them. I wished I had learned more, but I could only handle so much before getting overwhelmed, so I focused on the third one. This path initially was identical with the one which led to Hyrule eventually being flooded, yet the change occurred during the final battle where a different result happened. Instead of the hero of time defeating Ganondorf in battle, the Dark Lord proved too powerful and instead defeating the hero, killing him in cold blood. Historians weren't sure how this could have happened, but it did, and proved to be the beginning of a time known as the Great Downfall. With the hero's death, Ganondorf claimed the Triforce of Courage, strengthening his own power, yet he still needed the remaining piece. Upon discovering what happened, Princess Zelda sought to shatter her piece, the Triforce of Wisdom, but she was prevented and Ganondorf forced her into relinquishing it. With all 3 pieces in his possession, Ganondorf now had complete mastery of the world and no one could oppose him. It was around this time where he chose to abandon his human identity and became Ganon, a demonic monster who resembled a pig. I couldn't believe that was true until I saw an image of what he had become, whose power had spiraled out of control, yet there was a plan to deal with him. Princess Zelda and the 6 sages used their power and banished him to the Sacred Realm, thus preventing him from dominating Hyrule, yet this had an unfortunate consequence which became apparent soon enough. By banishing him, Ganondorf took the Triforce, thus taking away the light and hope of Hyrule. The Sacred Realm became corrupted with darkness as a result of Ganondorf's evil heart until it had become the Dark World, a twisted landscape where evil roamed freely. Many sought to come to this place in hopes of securing the Triforce out of greed for wanting their desires to come true, but never returned. Some either were killed by the Demon King or were trapped and eventually became monsters who couldn't go back to their world and became part of a demonic army under Ganondorf's command. This army grew both in size and power and would eventually attempt to pour through the barrier between the Dark World and Hyrule some centuries later, but it was thwarted by the actions of the King of Hyrule of that time. The descendants of the 7 sages, who had inherited their power from their ancestors, had been commanded to close the barrier, though it took some time as such an incantation proved difficult to create it. They were protected by the Knights of Hyrule, who served as a front line against Ganondorf's forces, yet were decimated as a result, leaving only a few surviving the conflict. Despite Hyrule coming out of the struggle, much of the kingdom had been devastated, and not only had the power of the sages been diminished, many people lost their lives. What had once been a beautiful kingdom had become a pale shadow, a wounded land that would take centuries to recover, assuming that it could. While there had been other conflicts which resulted in Hyrule being devastated throughout the ages, this one was seen as one of the worst ones. Had I been sent into that conflict by Ganondorf, I would have lost my mind due to seeing so much pain and misery, but instead he went with something more personal to him. Flipping back to the table of contents, I looked up the new chapter. I felt I had learned enough of the Great Downfall and turned straight to the first page of it, where I was presented with an image of what looked like Ganondorf's demonic form, Ganon, only much more hideous than before. At first, I turned away from the image as it honestly scared the living daylights out of me, but I eventually turned back and gazed upon what he had become. Having all that power must have resulted in him giving up what little of his humanity he had left and full embraced the demonic monster he had become. The beginning of the chapter stated that historians had no idea when the events of this chapter took place as far as the timeline was concerned, and encouraged readers to keep that in mind to avoid getting confused. According to the book, 10,000 years ago, a being known as Calamity Ganon appeared and began ravaging the kingdom of Hyrule, destroying everything in its path. 10,000 years. It sounded like a typo, but it wasn't. So would this have occurred just after the events of Ocarina of Time? If so, then there were questions that immediately would debunk certain theories, yet I chose to keep going in case an explanation came up. Calamity Ganon was a primal evil who had existed throughout Hyrule as long as anyone could remember, though some say that he used to be a member of the Gerudo tribe before becoming the abomination as seen in the image above. At least they established that this creature was Ganondorf to some degree. Many had tried destroying this primal evil in hopes it would never return, yet their efforts proved fruitless. Knowing something had to be done to prevent further destruction, the Sheikah, the eternal servants of the Hyrule royal family, invoked a plan they had been preparing for just such an occasion. Ever since the beginning, when Goddess Hylia ruled over the land before it became Hyrule, the Sheikah had been known for both their longevity and for being more advanced than the other tribes when it came to technology. This was evident when representatives of the Shadow Folk, a nickname associated to them by the common folk, presented to the King of Hyrule a means of containing Ganon. Their plan involved the use of ancient machinery that could combat Ganon, known as Guardians, sentient beings aimed at assisting Princess Zelda, who chose to stand against the evil which plagued Hyrule, and a chosen hero of great merit, but convincing the king wasn't easy.
How certain are you that these Guardians, as you call them, will be sufficient enough? They will be built using the finest parts along with skills passed down by the Sheikah since ancient times. You must admit that I question your abilities. Please say you are not doubting us, Your Majesty. While I will not deny that the Sheikah are far more advanced than the other tribes, the fact that you claim you can build hundreds of these Guardians has me not only wondering how you intend on pulling it off, but also that your efforts will be for Hyrule's benefit. Suffice to say, I am not convinced that this plan will defeat Ganon. He is an ancient evil who has festered throughout this land for centuries. No one, not even the sages, have been able to find a means of defeating him, which is why I feel your idea may merely bite us some time. But, we do have the means of defeating him. These Guardians alone will not be enough. This is true, which is why we also have an additional means to our plan. The Guardians are merely sentries that will be designed to attack Ganon relentlessly, and if they are to be destroyed by the demon, more can be built, as they are simple in structure, though there will be some variety. We shall also create 4 fortresses that shall serve as the centerpiece for this army of ours and shall prove instrumental. Again, I am not convinced by this.
It didn't take long for me to recognize who was portraying who here. The two representatives were being portrayed by both Lyra Heartstrings and Bonbon respectively. I wasn't surprised, as those two were practically inseparable, though they did look pretty weird dressed in Sheikah garb. Even though I've only interacted with them a few times, Lyra and Bonbon were the perfect example of what friendship could do for someone. But, there were times when they clearly went overboard, especially when it came to competition. I didn't see it happen, but I heard about their misadventure regarding their audition for the Wonder Colts during the friendship games. Those two could seriously give Pinkie Pie some serious competition given how they defied reality with their antics, but Pinkie could pull stuff out from anywhere, not to mention she had been defying reality for as long as anyone could remember. It took me a while, however, to recognize who was portraying this King of Hyrule, and it was ironic that I was thinking of Pinkie as her own father was portraying the king. Igneous Rock Pie wasn't who I could call an emotional person, given that he maintained a calm aura. How he never lost his sanity resulting from the ridiculous antics of his own daughter was impeccable, but his stoic personality was well known in Canterlot. I had only met him on a couple of occasions, namely when he told Pinky to tone it down with her parties, but because he always left such an impact, my friends and I often wondered how any of the Pie family related to Pinky. None of us doubted she was adopted, so perhaps she truly was a unique spirit within the Pie family clan, whose spirit was at times too much for them to handle, though they would never admit it to anyone. Anyway, Lyra and Bon Bon then presented a scroll to Igneous, who unfurled it, and gazed upon the designs of not only the guardians, but the 4 fortresses. His expression remained adamant, though he showed signs of being curious.
So? This is what you propose to me?
Igneous Rock asked. Lyra nodded.
Yes, Your Majesty. We of the Sheikah believe this is our best bet to destroy Calamity Ganon.
Bon Bon then added her thoughts.
As you can see, Your Majesty, the 4 fortresses shall be armed with numerous offensive and defensive capabilities designed for them to be able to go toe-to-toe against Ganon. Each one will also have its own unique abilities that will make them even more of a force to be reckoned with. The Guardians themselves, as Lyra stated, are sentries who shall provide assistance to the fortresses. And how much will this cost? We've figured out a means.
Igneous Rock then gazed upon Bon Bon. The expression on his face made her feel incredibly uncomfortable.
I am glad that you did, otherwise I would have refused your request without a second thought. Defeating Ganon is important, and I am aware that money is not everything, but this may not be what the other tribes feel, and in turn they could protest by saying that your idea could potentially result in Hyrule falling into bankruptcy. We have taken all of that into consideration.
Lyra nodded.
We have asked all of the tribes to contribute to the construction of the Guardians and the fortresses, though they initially expressed skepticism.
She then pointed to the images of the Guardians.
It has been decided that the Sheikah and the Hylians will construct each Guardian.
Igneous Rock then raised an eyebrow, prompting Lyra to look away momentarily before pointing her finger at an image of a fortress which resembled an elephant.
We shall do most of the work, while the Hylians will provide assistance and even be in charge of some projects. All tribes, however, will be working together on creating the 4 fortresses. Ganon's threat to our land must be dealt with, but would my people agree to this? The alternative is to be destroyed.
Bon Bon answered.
I know that doesn't sound very pleasant, but they know what's at stake right now. Your Majesty, we must do something about Calamity Ganon before he decimates all of Hyrule and leaves nothing but charred remains. The people will surely agree to our idea of building the Guardians and the 4 fortresses to help defend us against that accursed monster.
Igneous Rock looked at the designs on the scroll and immediately had concerns. Where would the Sheikah acquire the necessary material to build so many Guardians? Hyrule was rich with resources, but there was only so much that could be used before it would run out. These were nothing compared with the fortresses, given they were much larger in scope as dictated by their size. Again, he questioned how the Sheikah could do all of this. That's when he noticed additional details that initially escaped him, located to the left of each image. According to the image, the fortresses required living operators as opposed to being self-reliant like the Guardians.
Will the Guardians be under our control?
Lyra nodded slightly before raising her finger.
Well, I wouldn't say it like that. They are self-sufficient in that they function on their own, though they are programmed in advance to carry out whatever task is given to them. Once their current task is complete, the Guardians will remain inactive until another command is given.
Her heart began beating when she noticed what Igneous Rock was really looking at, the images of the fortresses, and she knew this would be the hardest part of their pitch.
As for the 4 fortresses, they are far too complex to be allowed to function on their own, so a pilot is necessary to operate them. It would require many individuals. Not necessarily. The fortresses can be operated with one person at the controls.
Bon Bon said. Igneous Rock seemed skeptical.
I must admit that I am curious as to how these fortresses will function, but I am not convinced that your plan will succeed. For one thing, you have not discussed how you plan on acquiring the necessary materials needed for all of these machines. Second, these actions could pose a threat to the royal family were the Sheikah to suddenly decide that they could govern Hyrule much better than I.
Bon Bon took offense to that.
Your Majesty, we Sheikah would never betray you. Perhaps not, but your recent technological advances have raised questions. And you see that as a cause for concern.
Igneous Rock nodded.
While the Sheikah have remained loyal to the royal family for countless centuries, the fact that you have been advancing far beyond what I would describe as acceptable boundaries has given me cause to be worried that you have ulterior motives.
His eyes suddenly opened wide upon seeing 2 additional images on the scroll that he hadn't noticed before due to focusing on the Guardians and fortresses.
It seems my concerns have merit, seeing as you have been deceiving me, Lyra, Bon Bon. Why did you not mention the fact that my own daughter, Zelda, is playing a significant part in this plan of yours. She insisted we not mention it.
Lyra answered, gulping.
Her Highness wishes to help defeat Ganon.
Bon Bon said.
While I am aware that Zelda possesses the same divine power that her ancestors have passed down through our family since the earliest records dictate, I cannot allow her to risk her life against the likes of Ganon even if she believes she can make a difference.
Igneous Rock said. According to a footnote, it says that ever since the goddess Hylia reincarnated into the earliest known incarnation of Zelda, her divine power had passed through the royal family, though it only passed down from mother to child. Not once has it ever been passed down to any son, thus the princes never possessed any special abilities. But, they were known to rely on their sisters when necessary, though some princes felt inadequate knowing they could never possess divine power. I'm surprised that after so many millennia, Hylia's power had never once waned despite other changes happening throughout Hyrule over the same time period. It also reaffirmed that the power was passed down to the oldest daughter, assuming that a king and queen had more than one girl and that the firstborn girl would be named Zelda in honor of the first incarnation. However, only a certain number of incarnations possessed the Triforce of Wisdom, implying that these versions of Zelda played much larger roles within the overall narrative as opposed to simply being given divine power as a result of their heritage. If I remembered correctly, it wasn't until Ganondorf's rise to power when the Triforce of Wisdom became integrated within the royal family of Hyrule through Zelda when that Zelda ended up acquiring it. Bon Bon protested.
But, Her Highness possesses the Triforce of Wisdom. That alone should be enough to convince you that she must help defeat Ganon. The one who possesses the Triforce of Courage is already on board, and with our machines, they shall have both the protection and the assistance needed to overcome the evil that plagues our fair kingdom. As the king, you alone have the final say.
Igneous Rock knew that he was defeated when it came to the safety of his daughter. If not for the Triforce of Wisdom, he could have easily forbade her to get involved in the conflict, but he knew she had to confront the Demon King. Only those with the golden power could oppose another who possessed it, thus the reason why some historians claimed that being bound by the Triforce were deemed cursed by it until they died or willingly gave it up. Knowing that Zelda would never consider the latter, he sighed and nodded his approval of the plan, and yet he had one condition which the Sheikah would have to agree on.
Very well. I approve of your plan. Thank you.
Lyra jumped for joy.
You have made a wise decision this day, Your Majesty. However, there is a condition that you must meet. What is it?
Igneous Rock paused before answering her question.
In order for me to approve of your plan, the Sheikah must be divided from one large tribe into several smaller groups and are to be scattered across the kingdom, where they will be forbidden to unite together into one tribe again. This is to ensure that you do not become too powerful, that you plan on overthrowing me and assuming control of Hyrule. I know your loyalty towards me is strong, but this must be done, otherwise my approval such be rescinded.
Lyra and Bon Bon both looked at each other before bowing.
We accept your condition. Excellent. Our people shall be made aware of your decision. Now, what shall we call these fortresses?
Igneous Rock asked.
They cannot simply be called as such because it would be disrespectful, so perhaps something that has a strong connection with each of the tribes. Yes, I believe that is the right course of action to take. Our plan was to have a member from each tribe pilot one of the fortresses.
Lyra said.
Will it be a difficult task?
Bon Bon shook her head.
It will take them some time to get used to them, but they will be able to control them as though they were an extension of themselves. Each fortress will also focus on a particular element that is native to the tribes of Hyrule, thus the stronger connection. For example, the one in the shape of the tusked creature shall represent water, the element known well by the Zoras, so one of them shall pilot it. How long will it take? I would say a couple of months.
Igneous Rock looked outside of the window and saw a shadow image of Ganon himself resonating from a section Hyrule which had become forbidden territory due to it being the place where he had proclaimed it his domain.
The Demon King's power continues to grow with every passing day. You must complete the construction of the Guardians and those fortresses within 3 weeks at the most. The sages have so far managed to contain him within the land he has corrupted with his foul mien, but they cannot continue this forever. You may use whatever resources you need to complete your machines, but it must be done quickly. It shall be done. You have our word.
Lyra said. Together with mainly the assistance of the Hylians, with the other tribes contributing in their own way, the Sheikah were able to create hundreds if not thousands of guardians along with the 4 fortresses. A pilot was chosen from each tribe, Zora, Goron, Rito, and Gerudo, and together with both Princess Zelda and the chosen hero, were successful in banishing Ganon by sealing him beneath Hyrule Castle where he remained dormant for close to 10,000 years. Already, I was confused as though the chapter had suddenly skipped over important information, but I quickly learned that said information could be found in the form of footnotes and references to other chapters. The Guardians themselves were simple machines, though compared to other Hyrulean technology, they were in a class of their own. Variations included Guardian Skywatchers, who could attack targets from below if their scanners detected enemies during flight, Guardian Turrets, immobile but capable of firing powerful lasers that covered a lengthy distance that served as a last line of defense, Guardian Scouts, who could equip different armaments and whose power increased with each model, and finally, the Guardian Stalkers, the main one which walked about on spider-like legs and could fire lasers from a single eye. Impressive as these were, they were nothing compared to the Divine Beasts, the 4 fortresses that served as the main attack force against Ganon. Each one represented an element that, in turn, were piloted by an individual from a tribe whose element resonated with them, and were based on an animal that once existed. The first, Ruda, the elephant, was powered by water, could adjust its trunk accordingly to maximize its abilities, use the water to power a water wheel inside its body, and was named after Princess Ruto of the Zoras. Rudania, the salamander, was powered by fire and could move about the most treacherous of terrain using its legs. While some historians disagreed on the classification, most said that Rudania was an anagram of Darunia, the legendary Goron chieftain and sage of fire. Next was Meadow, the eagle, the only divine beast capable of flight, and was powered by wind. It used a force field to protect itself from attacks. Its wings could be tilted from side to side to further increase its mobility but also reorients its interior. Unlike the other divine beasts, Meadowa's namesake has not been fully confirmed by historians, though they claim it was named after Medli, the sage of earth, who lived during the time where Hyrule was flooded by water after the great goddesses intervened. Finally, there was Naboris, the camel, who was powered by thunder. The humps on its back were lightning generators that it could use to protect itself from attacks, though its feet were deemed its one weak point and could potentially shut it down. Fortunately, it could use electrical shocks to protect its feet by striking the ground. This beast was named after Neburu, the second in command of the Gerudo who became the Sage of Spirit after being brainwashed by Ganondorf's surrogate mothers. Each beast was piloted by a member of the respective tribe they represented, though it took them some time to get used to operating such advanced technology. Once Ganon had been defeated, there was no longer any need for the Guardians or the Divine Beasts, and so they were all buried where they became stories passed down throughout the ages, their locations forgotten by the ravages of time. This would remain so until one day, close to 10,000 years after the Demon King's imprisonment, when a prophecy predicted his return, yet only the royal family were aware. Ganon, or rather, Calamity Ganon, I really should call this version by his proper name, had become a fairy tale passed down through millennia, so the people didn't believe such a beast even existed. The prophecy was first recognized by King Roam, the king of Hyrule during this time period. He took it very seriously and commanded both his people and the Sheikah to search and excavate large swaths of land in hopes of finding an answer. It came in the form of unearthing the Guardians and the Divine Beasts, though they had no idea how either worked, resulting in hastened research designed to uncover the secrets lost to the ages before Calamity Ganon would return. A representative from each tribe was chosen to command a Divine Beast and trained to use it for when the time came, though it proved challenging. From Goron City, Daruk, known throughout his tribe as the strongest of Gorons, was chosen to pilot Rudania, and from the Rito village, Rivali, known as the best marksman who had ever graced the skies, piloted Meadow. The Gerudo chose their pilot for Naboris, Urbosa, known for her exquisite beauty, though historians weren't sure what her status was amongst her people yet. Some claimed she was a mighty warrior while others claimed she was the leader. Finally, the Zora's champion was Mipha, though she was different in that she chose to become the pilot of Ruda as opposed to being chosen by her people.
You did what, Mipha? I have decided to become the pilot of Divine Beast Varuda. Father will never allow you to do it. As much as I respect our father, this is something that I must do in the name of the Zoras in Hyrule. Mipha, you know full well that father wishes for you to succeed him as ruler of our people when his time comes, so to make such a reckless decision is beyond unthinkable. If I were the older between the both of us, I would be the one to assume the throne and not you. It couldn't be helped, Sidon. And what about Muzo? He will be devastated to learn of your decision. Have I become so delicate that I must be coddled by both my father and my teacher? I'm not saying that, sister. You know better than anyone, my dear little brother, that I have been training in the art of combat under Muse's guidance. As such, I am more than capable of taking care of myself, though my heart does not yearn for fighting unlike many of the others. Were Calamity Ganon's threat nothing but a rumor, I would not have made my decision without consulting our father, but the matter has gone beyond the need for talking.
I once again stopped as I recognized one character but not the other. Microchips was portraying who I assumed was the prince of the Zoras, Sidon, though I will admit that the glasses didn't really work well on a Zora. At Canterlot High, he was always hanging out with Sandalwood as both complement one another, though at times he got frustrated when people didn't take his love of mathematics seriously or poked fun at him for it. I had no intention of questioning his intellect, of a sense of not wanting to be insulting, but I would call him the third smartest student at CHS behind Twilight Sparkle and myself. The one who was Mipha is who I didn't recognize, so I turned to Princess Twilight's notes in my magic journal for the answers. Looking at the physical features of Mipha, she was being portrayed by Mage Meadowbrook, one of the pillars of Equestria, who saved Equestria from the Pony of Shadows. She was known for being a healer who wore a special mask that prevented her from contracting any diseases. It looked like a plague doctor's mask her patients had, and by using what her mother taught her, she saved entire towns from diseases, but soon disappeared when she was tasked with joining a group that aimed to defend Equestria from evil forces. Her mask became the artifact that represented her when the Pony of Shadows was banished from Equestria, and when she disappeared, it was returned to her family, who had since passed it down from generation to generation until it was used to bring her back along with the other pillars. I doubted Meadowbrook would want to wear it again after so long time, wasn't very kind to her mask judging from the picture Princess Twilight took of it, and most likely desired her descendants to keep it as a memento, even though she now existed amongst them again after being gone for a millennium. Meadowbrook reached behind her back, and resting on a ledge was a beautifully crafted trident which could have only been forged by a master smith.
Dento forged this for me despite his own hesitation towards me becoming a fighter given my gentle nature.
Grabbing it, she turned around to face Microchips, who gazed upon the weapon with such curiosity that Meadowbrook couldn't help but smile.
Such a curious nature for one so young as you, my little brother, Sidon. You know, I sometimes question my reasoning for wanting to be taught the ways of war. The male Zoras within our tribe love going out to battle against the monsters who plague our domain, but battle is no love of mine.
Microchips grinned sheepishly.
It's because you love that Hylian man. Oh!
Meadowbrook exclaimed as she suddenly blushed.
Have you been reading my diary again, Sidon? Everyone in Zora's domain knows that you are in love with him. Even father. Yes. I suppose I am not being very subtle with my feelings, am I not?
Microchips shook his head.
No one is questioning your feelings, sister, but some think that you should settle down with a Zora as opposed to a Hylian. I don't really understand why you are so interested in this particular Hylian, as they're all the same, aren't they? This Hylian is different. How so?
Placing her trident on the ground, Meadowbrook clasped her hands together and looked up at the sunset above them.
When he first came here to Zora's domain many years ago with his father, who was part of King Roam's entourage, I was able to lay my eyes on him. I cannot explain why, but I felt a kindred spirit between us which compelled me to want to know him a lot more and maybe become his friend.
She closed her eyes and the thought of the Hylian began playing in her mind.
It took me some time to talk with him because of how nervous I can be around others unfamiliar to me, but around him, I felt comfortable, completely at ease. I heard from father that he has been assigned to be Princess Zelda's bodyguard. If this is true, then I am happy for him. Father also says that he now wields the Blade of Evil's Bane.
Meadowbrook was familiar with the legends passed down in Hyrule as a result of her training, including that of the Master's Sword, yet her heart ached upon knowing that the man she secretly loved had been chosen to wield it. She knew that those who were chosen to wield that blade ended up fighting against great evil, their lives hanging in the balance as they didn't know if they would live to see the next sunrise, their actions determining the fate of Hyrule, yet she wished the Hylian she cared about had not been given such a huge responsibility. Convincing him was pointless, as the idea of going into battle would be something he could never ignore.
Sidon. When did he grow up so quickly? Did you forget that we Zoras age at a slower pace than the Hylians? Yes. That did slip my mind. Other than those Sheikah, no other tribe has such longevity like we do. Are you suggesting that I could never love him because of our long life?
Microchips shook his head.
No. I don't see that as a problem, though some amongst our kind and his would find it questionable. I think he might be interested in the princess, though he hasn't made any advances yet towards her.
Meadowbrook's jaw dropped.
How would you know about that?
Microchips suddenly went silent, and she immediately knew that he was hiding something from her. But, instead of making him confess, she merely shrugged it off, though she admitted in her mind that he was correct.
Perhaps it is not too late to express my feelings to him. After all, I have gone and prepared our most sacred of armors for his use whenever he has need of it. You crafted him Zora armor. I did. You do know what that means in our society, don't you? I do. Then I guess you really do have feelings for him.
Microchips said.
Hey. I always thought you two were close because of how long you've known each other, but I didn't think you would go as far as to craft that armor. Maybe you'll get lucky and Princess Zelda doesn't reciprocate any feelings towards him. Sure, the warriors won't be happy about it as some of them wish to be your betrothed, but I know you better than anyone, Mipha, except for our father of course. Once an idea is in your head, no one can change it.
Meadowbrick smiled.
Thank you for understanding, Sidon.
I had a suspicion that the one Meadowbrick and Microchips were talking about was the incarnation of Link who existed when these events were occurring. While I thought it was touching how she truly loved him, it felt like a one-sided affair more than anything else since he hadn't said anything about it. I was curious as to Meadowbrick, Mipha and Link first met and how their friendship blossomed, but I needed to continue on with the story. Having chosen herself as Ruda's pilot, Meadowbrick revealed her decision days later in Zora's domain before her father, much to his and everyone else's surprise. What I was surprised with was how he was so massive in size compared to everyone else. He was not named King Zora but rather King Dorifan, a break in tradition if I ever saw one, and I immediately recognized him as Cantorzoom, the famous movie director and the uncle of Juniper Montage. Despite having a friendly attitude, Cantor could easily lose his sanity whenever anything went wrong during a movie production. People in his line of work were known to possess high levels of stress, and he definitely had that in spades, but he was also firm when it came to putting business ahead of family. Still, he was huge, a testament to how Zoras could grow as a species.
No. I cannot allow you to pilot such a machine,
Cantorzoom said.
Of all the Zora in our kingdom, I am the only one who is capable of piloting it. Nonsense,
Cantorzoom said.
There are plenty of Zora who can perform such a task.
Meadowbrick shook her head.
Father. I have a very strong connection with Ruda. I can hear it calling out to me in my dreams, telling me that I am the one who is destined to become its pilot and use it when Calamity Ganon returns to cover our world in darkness, just like it had done in ancient times.
This time, Cantorzoom shook his head.
To be honest, Mipha, I am still hesitant to believe what King Roam said about Calamity Ganon's return. While I do not believe that he would lie to me, otherwise he wouldn't be excavating these guardians and divine beasts, but what if the ancient horror does not return? Would you be marching out into battle for no reason? Can you even control such an ancient mechanism whose origins date back countless millennia? No, I could never let you, she who shall succeed me as ruler of all Zoras, risk your life against a threat that may not even come to pass. Father.
Meadowbrick began.
You know that it must be me because I possess a special gift. Yes, your ability to heal wounds, a rare gift amongst Zora. And besides, Princess Zelda has been personally studying the divine beasts.
Cantorzoom lurched forward upon hearing that and almost fell off of his throne.
What? Princess Zelda has been researching these ancient machines? Well, I suppose that does mean that you would be able to control this Varuda, but it doesn't change the fact that you would be placing yourself in great danger.
He lurched back and adjusted himself before continuing, his subjects breathing a sigh of relief.
Tell me, Mipha. What did Princess Zelda discover about this beast? The orbs located on Divine Beast Varuda's shoulders are special mechanisms which allow it to control the water it generates.
Meadowbrick answered.
The beast is powered by water and can use its appendage to unleash an infinite amount of water. It is truly a remarkable sight, Father, a testament to those who created it, and it can even use water on itself in order to power additional mechanisms within. To be able to generate unlimited water is unbelievable. It requires one with incredible willpower to pilot it successfully. And you believe yourself to be that one?
Meadowbrick nodded.
I do, Father. My ability to heal wounds resonated with the divine beast when I first laid my hands upon it when King Roam presented it to us. I believe it to be a sign that I am destined to pilot it against Calamity Ganon, and it would also allow me to keep watch over him.
Cantorzoom smirked.
Ah. So you have an ulterior motive, do you not?
Meadowbrick blushed.
That is to say.
Raising his hand, Cantorzoom brought everyone in attendance to attention.
Even though it goes against my own judgment as a father, I shall permit you to become the pilot, though you must ensure me that you shall be the utmost careful.
His announcement sent shocks of gasps amongst the Zoras, but again, Cantor raised his hand, and they went silent.
I know that my decision comes as a shock, but I realize that Mifa is the only one amongst us who can control this divine beast.
One Zora then protested.
You cannot have her do this, Your Majesty. Do you see any other way? These divine beasts will be the end of us all. I understand your concern given that they are foreign in design, but they are our best bet against Calamity Ganon. We don't even know if it exists.
Another Zora added.
King Roam, with all due respect to him, must be crazy to believe in such a legend.
A third Zora then made their point heard.
We've known peace for countless ages, so what makes him believe that Hyrule will be plunged into darkness by this supposed beast? I'm sure the other tribes feel the same way about the subject and are surely against sending one of their own into battle.
Cantor Zoom then pointed up where divine beast Faruda was perched atop a mountain ledge.
You can see for yourselves that King Roam's words are no lie with regards to the existence of the divine beasts and the guardians.
He then paused upon realizing that he was contradicting himself over what he said before about believing in Calamity Ganon's return.
I admit that I was wrong. If Calamity Ganon returns and the signs point to this as a possibility, then we must send our best Zora warrior to fight against this ancient evil. Mifa, you shall depart immediately to meet with King Roam at Hyrule Castle.
The Zoras were shocked aside from Meadowbrook, who graciously accepted.
I shall prepare to leave at once, father. You shall do us proud, my daughter. I will be sure to live up to your expectations and those of our people.
As Meadowbrook turned and walked out of the throne room, the Zora who initially protested Cantor Zoom's decision spoke to him privately.
Are you sure that this is the best course of action for our people? The Hylians are taking a huge gamble by unearthing these mechanisms, as they could use them against the other tribes and subjugate us to their will, or even worse, destroy us. You need not worry about it. But I must. As Princess Mifa's teacher, I fear she is getting into something far beyond her means. She will be fine, Muzo.
Cantor Zoom said.
Mifa is where she wants to be, and that is with the one who has won over her heart. It took me a while to understand this, but I know that to deny her would bring me shame as both her king and her father. If something would befall her, and I pray that it doesn't, I shall take full responsibility, because it would have been my decision and no one else's. It is best this way to prevent my people from being condemned by my foolish actions.
If I had been in King Dorephan's position, I wouldn't have sent my daughter to become one of the chosen defenders of Hyrule. But, I supposed he didn't really have much of a choice, as among the Zora, Mifa was the only one who possessed any ability the rest of them didn't have. Mifa's grace, as it came to be known, was a healing power that could even save someone from death, though she mainly used it for healing wounds. No one knew how she acquired it, but it proved useful especially towards the champion chosen by the Master Sword. Mifa never once viewed her ability as a curse and embraced it, as it enabled her to contribute without having to fight. Among the Zora who didn't want Mifa to become their champion, Muzo, King Dorephan's advisor, and Mifa's teacher, was the most vocal about it. He viewed himself as her second father, though he knew his place regarding his king's judgment as a parent. He was said to have harbored a hatred towards Hylians because of how they had unearthed the ancient relics of the past, guardians, and the divine beasts, and especially towards he who served Princess Zelda as a bodyguard. This sentiment would echo amongst the Zora, as they believed Mifa to be a divine being who was destined to lead her people to greater glory than any precious Zora monarch before her. There was a small footnote about the champions, and I was curious to read about it. The term champion referred to the four chosen by their people to represent them, who were to be pilots of the four divine beasts, much like their ancient ancestors had done. The hero who had been chosen by the Master Sword was also a champion, yet he had the most important task of all, fight and destroy Calamity Ganon, as only he could do so with the Blade of Evil's Bane. To ensure his success, he was to be aided by the others through their divine beasts to serve as a distraction for the great evil, thus making them assistants. Leading them was Princess Zelda, who, like her ancestors before her, possessed a divine power, but unlike them, she suffered from a confidence problem. While her ancestors had acquired their divine power either through birth or from an early age, this version of Zelda had yet to awaken her true potential. Tried as she might, she couldn't awaken the divine power, so she began an interest in learning about the divine beasts and guardians to mask her failings as a princess. This placed Zelda at odds with her father, who wanted her to continue with her training instead of focusing her efforts on her curiosity. Back to the story, when Mifa arrived at Hyrule Castle Town, she and the other champions met to become familiar with one another before they met Zelda herself. Pleased that the tribes had chosen excellent candidates to pilot the divine beasts, Zelda left to undertake some research on ancient technology, leaving the champions to discuss amongst themselves how they felt about her being their leader. It was here that I recognized two of the champions, though I didn't know who the third one was, prompting me to once more rely on Princess Twilight's notes for clarification on this one individual. Daruk, of the Gorons, was portrayed by Torch, the former Dragon Lord of the Dragon Kingdom, who was succeeded by his daughter, Ember. From what Her Highness described about him, his booming voice, not to mention his size and ferocity, earned him tremendous respect from his fellow dragons, though they also feared him. Despite these traits, Torch cared for his kind and wanted nothing but the best for them. Rivali, of the Rito, was portrayed by Dr. Cabal-Laren, one of Daring Do's archenemies in the books. I have read the entire series, though Rainbow Dash and Twilight Sparkle are much bigger fans than I was. He was devious, manipulative, and overall unpleasant, but you had to give him credit for knowing how to concoct clever schemes and knowing a lot about ancient lore. He planned on never giving up until he had defeated Daring Do once and for all. Finally, Urbosa, of the Garudo, was the one I didn't recognize, but upon looking at Princess Twilight's notes, she turned out to be one of the pillars of Equestria, Somnambula. In ancient times, she had helped her people against a sphinx by using what little she had to ensure their survival and to give them hope for a better tomorrow, earning her the anger of the sphinx. It is said that she was able to rescue a prince by the name of Hizen from the Sphinx by correctly answering a riddle and crossing a bridge over a pool of unknown liquid blindfolded, and without her ability to fly, the image Princess Twilight provided showed that she was a Pegasus, resulting in a town being named in her honor. She even became the prince's advisor despite initially refusing, saying that he was better suited by another, but accepted graciously. The four champions, now having gotten to know one another, and having met Princess Zelda, talked amongst themselves regarding what they had learned of their duties.
What did you think of our audience with Princess Zelda?
Somnambula asked.
If you want my opinion, she doesn't seem like an ideal leader.
Cabal-Laren answered.
I've no disrespect against her status as a princess, but her leadership skills seem to be lacking when something like that is sure to get us all killed. Figures you would be the only one to think like that. If we are to succeed against Calamity Ganon, we must have a leader who will not shirk in their duties. Let me guess.
Somnambula began.
You want to become that leader?
Cabal-Laren grinned.
Well, I suppose I could take a crack at it if the rest of you aren't interested. In battle, I've been known to remain calm and not allow anything to distract me from what needs to be done, hence why my people chose me as their representative.
He then pointed to a beautifully crafted bow on his back and grinned once again.
With this bow on my back, designed by yours truly, the enemy doesn't stand a chance.
Torch scratched his head.
You sure you think you're the best suited to be the leader? Are you implying that you would make for a better leader? No.
Torch answered.
I'm more at home being a fighter rather than a leader who usually has to be in the back and give out orders. But what I do know is that being a leader takes a great deal of willpower, as there's no telling when you'll end up losing control of the situation. I don't doubt you, Rivali, but I think we should give Princess Zelda a chance before jumping to a wrong conclusion. Besides, if she wasn't ready to do this, her father wouldn't have made her the leader of the champions now, would he? I suppose not. Besides, I've seen Princess Zelda's behavior these past couple of days and it worries me to no end.
The other champions gasped, with Cabal-Laren taking point.
What? How do you know about that? I thought we all came here to Hyrule Castle Town at the same time? Granted, I could have gotten here faster than the rest of you, but I was needed to take care of a small band of monsters threatening Rito Village.
Torch fumbled with his fingers and expressed a sheepish grin on his face.
About that?
He seemed incredibly nervous until Cabal-Laren stomped his foot, prompting the Goron to suddenly blurt out what he knew.
I've been here for 2 days.
Looking around to see the others staring at him with hawkish looks, Torch blushed slightly before scratching his head again whilst continuing to express that sheepish grin of his.
I couldn't wait for you guys, so I got here as soon as I could. That allowed me the chance to observe Princess Zelda as she went about her business as I spoke with her father. Why didn't you mention that before? You didn't ask.
Cabal-Laren slapped his forehead.
Of all they.
He calmed himself down before saying something he would regret.
What did you mean by her behavior? She seemed distracted by something and constantly ignored everyone around her. That doesn't sound like the Zelda I know.
Somnambula said.
You've met her before.
Somnambula nodded.
She has visited Gerudo Town a few times in the past when she was younger and before this whole Calamity Ganon business popped up. She didn't go on her own, as even she knows that making it through the desert is nothing short of suicide unless you're prepared. When I first met her, I thought of her as being just another pompous royal who wanted to prove herself by wandering about in the desert. But when she came up to me to chat, I decided to indulge her curiosity and learned that there was much more to her than appearances suggested. She seems like an ordinary princess,
Torch said.
Oh, and who happens to be interested in being a scholar? That's because you're only seeing what's on the outside. And you know what makes her tick?
ARandomAudiobookAppeared asked.
I do. Forgive me for being a little unconvinced. It's not your fault for not understanding, Rivali,
Somnambula said.
Zelda has been known to open up only to those she feels she can relate to while shutting out everyone else with an emotionless presence. Someone like you would be one she'd ignore without hesitation, whilst she would gladly tell me anything given how close we are. Anyway, she's been on edge lately due to not being able to awaken her divine powers.
ARandomAudiobookAppeared was shocked.
Are you serious, Urbosa? I thought she would have done that by now.
Torch had no idea what they were talking about, so he decided to ask the question.
What do you mean by divine power? You're not seriously saying that you don't know? We Gorons usually don't pay attention to anything unless it covers rocks, fighting, and having a good time. I can't believe you just said that, Daruk.
Somnambula snapped her fingers to grab their attention, though it felt like a thunderclap had just occurred when she did so.
Look. The point is that she hasn't unlocked her power and she's been bothered by it ever since. It also doesn't help that King Roam is concerned that she isn't doing enough to find a way to unleash that power. I was told not to say anything, but I felt the need to tell you three, as we'll all be working with her against Calamity Ganon. You had better not repeat anything, otherwise you'll definitely get on my bad side and learn what it means to mess around with thunder. Do you think that's why the king is thinking of assigning her a bodyguard? He didn't seem to imply that when we all met him before meeting Zelda.
In the meantime, Torch turned his attention to Meadowbrook, who had so far avoided the entire conversation and instead had been practicing her healing ability on some local animals who had apparently injured themselves.
Say, how come you haven't said anything, Mifa? You're a champion like us, so your input is greatly appreciated. Also, what have you been doing with those critters?
Meadowbrook was startled by Torch suddenly speaking to her that she froze on the spot and struggled to come up with a response.
Well, you see, the thing is,
it was clear that she had trouble talking to other people, but she shook her head to regain her composure so as not to offend Torch.
I've been practicing my healing on these small, innocent creatures. My gift is one that only I possess amongst the Zora, making me unique, but then it is a reminder that I am different from them and that my preference is to help others and not fight. You're not the only one who has a special power.
I had to stop upon seeing yet another footnote which talked about the 4 special powers each of the champions possessed. I had already learned about Mifa's grace, so I ignored her mentioning in the footnote and focused on the other 3. Despite loving battle over most things, Daruk took self-protection seriously, hence why his special power was all about surviving against any attack no matter how strong. Daruk's protection would surround him in an ethereal shield and could absorb any kind of blow before sending it back to whoever attacked him. It was like having an extra shield even when you were using one that could never run out. Among the Rito, Rivali was seen as being in a class all of his own, especially when it came to his ability to fly. While other Rito required the wind to be able to fly about in the sky, he could generate his own wind gusts on the spot, allowing him to fly upward. This was known as Rivali's Gale and could be used to observe any dangerous areas ahead by viewing them from a higher vantage point. In battle, it didn't provide any offensive or defensive measures against monsters, but then it sounded like Rivali didn't appreciate being tethered to the ground and preferred to remain airborne as much as possible. Unlike the other 3, Urbosa didn't have a natural ability but instead one that was artificial in that it was provided by a magical artifact. As long as any Gerudo could remember, this artifact had been passed down from chieftain to chieftain and possessed the power of thunder. With a snap of her fingers, Urbosa could cause it to shoot forth lightning to catch monsters off guard or to perhaps bring people to attention. The Thunder Helm, as it was known, was a beautiful artifact one could wear on their face, though their vision would be slightly weakened until they could get used to it. Urbosa's Fury, in conjunction with this artifact, had an incredible range and was designed to be an offensive power.
Do you all possess a power like I do? I'm the only one who technically doesn't.
Somnambula answered before presenting the Thunder Helm which she had attached on her belt.
My power comes from this little trinket which has been in my possession for many years, though I aim on passing down to the next Gerudo chieftain as is custom with my people. I wouldn't mess around with the Thunder Helm as it can be quite surprising as well as shocking. That is a beautiful artifact. Thank you for the compliment, Mifa. If it is alright with you, I would rather stay as far away from it as possible.
Meadowbrook said.
We Zoras aren't very comfortable around anything electric-based even though we are the ones who developed shock arrows for use with bows.
Caballaren then interrupted.
I believe there is one important thing we need to talk about. What else can be said about Princess Zelda?
Torch asked.
I'm more concerned with that other champion she mentioned. You mean the one who wields the Master Sword?
Caballaren nodded.
That's him. Even though we've not been introduced to him yet, I can already tell that he's going to be nothing but trouble. I mean, why should someone who can wield that blade be allowed to become one of the champions of Hyrule?
Somnambula shook her head.
I think the answer is pretty obvious, and besides, he is the only one who can defeat Calamity Ganon. Are you saying we have to assist him? Pretty much. I am already not liking this swordsman despite not meeting him,
Caballaren said.
If anything, we should be the ones to take on Ganon since we have the divine beasts on our side and not merely be assistants whose purpose is to pave the way for one person who just so happens to have a legendary sword. Again, you're contradicting yourself. You seem to be pretty accepting of him, Urbosa. That makes two of us,
Torch said.
Link and I have been friends for a long time. Despite his small size in comparison to other Gorons, he has the heart of a true hero and has been personally trained by both his father and King Roam as a knight. Sure, he doesn't say very much, but when he does, you'll remember him. I suppose if there was one criticism I could give about him, it'd be his lack of body mass.
Meadowbrook then spoke up.
He and I have been childhood friends. No kidding. No.
Caballaren rubbed the bridge of his beak before groaning.
You three are all against me. Fine. I can take a hint on where you all stand. I'll hold off on my judgment until we actually meet this so-called champion. I still stand by my opinion that he isn't going to amount to much, but if he somehow surpasses even my own expectations, then and only then will I consider him an equal to me, or perhaps even more than that.
Wow. It looked like I had found another character whom I disliked, though I had to admit that Rivali was right about one thing. The hero who was the fifth champion needed to prove himself worthy before his fellow champions and not be recognized just because he could wield the Master Sword. The sword itself isn't what makes someone a hero, but rather it is their own heart that does this. Still, Rivali sounded like he was jealous that he wasn't the one who got to defeat Calamity Ganon, and just couldn't accept anyone else taking it from him. No wonder the others were at odds with him. Not only was the hero chosen to be the fifth champion, he would also be assigned to be Princess Zelda's bodyguard against her wishes. Initially, she couldn't accept the fact that he had been commanded to watch over her, and many times she commanded him to leave her alone. This incarnation of Link, much like his predecessors, never uttered a single word, yet historians say that he had a reason for being silent that was known only to Zelda herself. Link would eventually earn her respect when he saved her from a group of assassins after being in her companionship for several months. The tribes of Hyrule had certainly changed in some regards, though in others they remained the same, yet they all ultimately swore their allegiance to King Roam. The Zoras still resided within Zora's domain, though they had long since abandoned the idea of living within a cavern and instead lived outside in a beautiful city made from crystalline orb and of course surrounded by water. Fish were no longer their primary means, and now they focused on forging shock arrows, special arrows with electric-infused tips that could shock enemies, yet they were vulnerable to these due to being aquatic creatures. They also forged weapons which reflected their appreciation for beauty. Unlike in the past, where they guarded all rivers and bodies of water, the Zora only guarded watery areas that were connected to their domain. The Gorons still had their Goron city located on Death Mountain, though like the Zoras, they too had chosen to reside outside rather than be inside. Because of the intense heat coming from Death Mountain, visitors were required to either use a special elixir or wear a specialized armor, otherwise they would die. Perhaps the most famous location in Goron City, and one where visitors were encouraged to view at least once, was the statue of Daruk, carved into a mountain overlooking the city. Faces of Goron's past were etched into the mountain, yet it was Daruk himself who had been given the ultimate of blessings. It is said that construction of the statue took many years to complete, though it began a few years before Calamity Ganon returned. Even in death, no one would ever forget Daruk. The Rito tribe was the one I had no experience with, so I needed more information regarding them. It is said that they descended from the Zoras by choosing to abandon the waters of Hyrule and evolved into bird-like creatures that called the sky their home. At one time, the Rito were mostly human but with bird features, but had since become anthropomorphic avians. Male Rito were trained to become fierce warriors who would protect the skies of their village from attackers, whilst female Rito would raise their children, but they had additional duties designed to ensure the village would prosper, such as creating armor that could keep anyone warm even in the harshest of winter conditions. Finally, there was the Gerudo tribe, and their very existence made no sense at all. I thought they assimilated into Hylian society when it became apparent that they would be wiped out within a few generations. Unless it was in a different timeline, they shouldn't exist, and yet this was the case. Despite coming back from the brink without any explanation, the Gerudo still resided within the desert, though their society had changed in terms of their hierarchy. Men were forbidden from entering Gerudo town, their settlement, unless they were made an exception, though this was extremely rare. Even Gerudo males, rare as they were, couldn't set foot in the town without being promptly kicked out, or even worse, be arrested simply for being a man. The Gerudo were led by a chieftain, where the title would pass down from mother to child rather than a king as it was in the ancient past. I was curious to know more about the Gerudo of this new era of Hyrule, mainly due to Ganondorf I supposed, so I flipped through a number of pages before stopping at an interesting section that talked about not only them but also their greatest champion, Urbosa. The Gerudo over the course of the millennia stopped believing in Hylia and instead believed that their ancestors watched over them from beyond the grave. Much like their ancestors before them, they were still a warrior race, and were skilled at using all manner of weapons, yet also respected those who possessed an equal skill. Urbosa, the Gerudo's champion, and the pilot of divine beast Vanaboris, was known not only for her beauty but also her skills as a fighter. She had a strong bond with Zelda and was seen as an adoptive sister to the princess, yet Urbosa's heart would always belong to her people. According to historians, she once led the Gerudo as their chieftain and wielded the artifact, the Thunder Helm, as mentioned earlier, but also wielded 2 additional artifacts. The Scimitar of the Seven, a sword crafted by a master smith, along with its counterpart, Daybreaker, a shield of equal measure, became national treasures of her people, and whenever Urbosa used them in battle, it was said that she moved about like a dancer. As mentioned, she was viewed as an adoptive sister to Princess Zelda and took it upon herself to ensure that she would always have someone watching over her. She also believed that the 5th champion, Link, had great potential, though she worried that he couldn't find any common ground with Zelda. It says here that one late afternoon, Urbosa was going over some maintenance regarding Naboris, when a chance encounter would force her to fight for the future of her people and her own survival. She would come face to face with one whose connection with her people went back countless ages.
Ha! What do you think of divine beast Vanaboris?
Somnambula asked as she laughed.
We're certainly high up off the ground. Don't tell me that you're afraid of heights. I can't help it. I prefer having my feet on solid ground rather than being up here. I mean, I'm standing on solid ground right now, but I could get shaken off by this thing's erratic movement across the desert.
Somnambula laughed.
You never cease to amaze me, Sassy Saddles. You're the chieftain, so you should set a good example by not showing off your fear, yet here you are doing just that in front of me of all people. Granted, your fears are warranted, as Naboris can be a little unpredictable what with its powers. It took me a while to figure out how this thing worked, though I feel there is still more for me to learn before it can be used against Calamity Ganon.
Sassy Saddles? I read about her from Princess Twilight's letters, though I wasn't expecting her to be here. She was gainfully employed by the equestrian version of Rarity at her boutique in Canterlot, though she tried using a system that gave her way too much control and influence, resulting in her learning a hard lesson about going too far. She still works there, though follows Rarity's rules to the letter, but does have some leeway on a few things. I guess this meant that Urbosa wasn't the Gerudo chieftain, which made sense as I doubted her tribe would let their chieftain undertake such a task as dealing with Ganon.
To be fair, Urbosa, I wish you had been chosen as chieftain.
Sassy Saddles said.
We've been through this many times.
Somnambula said as she lifted her arms in frustration.
As the daughter of the previous chieftain, you were destined to inherit the position, and besides, you've shown just how capable you are of being a good leader.
Sassy Saddles shook her head before looking down at her feet.
The Gerudo respect you a lot more than they do me, given how you've been chosen to pilot Naboris. You've even got our people's most sacred artifact, the Thunder Helm, in your possession, a treasure many assumed I would have because of being chief. I'm surprised our people haven't died out or anything under my leadership. Mother was foolish to have chosen me to succeed her. You were the better choice, yet you insisted on taking the path of a warrior. I could never lead the Gerudo like you. You're wrong.
Reaching for a sword attached to her belt, Somnambula drew it out and presented it before Sassy Saddles.
A warrior like me could never lead the Gerudo, as both my hands and my blade have been stained by battle, a stain that would corrupt our people, driving them to wanting to wage war against the other tribes like they did eons ago. Your mother, the former chief, knew what she was doing when she named you her successor on her deathbed. I knew the same thing, which is why I passed it up and chose to be a warrior who fought for our pride. You are pure compared to me, Sassy, and purity is what's needed for our people. So why didn't I acquire the Thunder Helm?
Sassy Saddles asked.
It has been passed down from chief to chief for as long as anyone can remember, yet mother insisted on you having it instead of me. It alone is why you should be chief instead of me. Maybe your mother thought you weren't ready for it. She was right given how I feel conflicted.
Somnambula walked over to Sassy Saddles and placed her hand on her shoulder.
You remind me an awful lot of Princess Zelda. She's just like you in that she feels she's unworthy of the responsibility that's been placed on her shoulders. She has tried everything to understand what her destiny is meant to be, but nothing has come of it.
Sassy Saddles looked up at Somnambula.
Really? The Hylian princess is going through the same thing? I didn't think she would ever feel anything like that given that she was born into the role of succeeding her father. Heh. Kind of like how I was born into the role of succeeding my mother as the next Gerudo chieftain.
Seeing Somnambula smile in response made her look away for a moment.
But that doesn't change the fact that you should have been chief. Princess Zelda is just biding her time until everything falls into place, while I will never be as successful as you, Urbosa. I don't expect you to. What do you mean? While it's true that I am the champion, I am simply that and nothing more.
Somnambula answered.
History will remember me for this accomplishment along with the other small details I've done in my life, but you'll be remembered too as the chieftain who gave Urbosa the strength she needed and the convictions she lacked. Without your guiding hand, I'd probably be lost out there. You're just saying that. Yes, but you're missing the point. And that is, we each have our roles to play in the grand scheme.
Somnambula answered.
I may be loved by the people, Sassy, but I will never have the love that they have for you. You are their beacon of hope, the one they believe will lead them to a better tomorrow. You will shape us into being a tribe respected by the other tribes across Hyrule. I know I saved our town from that ghost some time ago, but that was minor compared with what you'll accomplish as chief, Sassy. My advice is to not let yourself feel inadequate, as that leads to failure. Embrace being the chief and carve out your own legacy.
Sassy Saddles then gave Somnambula a big hug.
You always know how to cheer me up, Urbosa. It's what I do. I think I'll go back to town and give this whole chief thing another go. That's the spirit. What will you do now? I still need to check on a couple of things regarding the Boris energy output.
Somnambula answered.
I know it sounds weird hearing me say that, but this beast needs to be in perfect condition when the time comes for me and the other champions to deal with Calamity Ganon. I'll come back as soon as possible, but don't expect me to join everyone for our daily evening feast later tonight.
As she left Divine Beast Vanaboris by climbing down a ladder built into the side of the beast, Sassy Saddles waved goodbye to Somnambula, leaving the champion alone with her thoughts on everything that had happened. To think that mere weeks ago, she had been introduced to those chosen by the other tribes of Hyrule to pilot their respective divine beasts, and before that, she was merely a Gerudo warrior who had earned the respect of her people by saving them. She still felt overwhelmed with what she had been tasked to accomplish, but she knew giving up before it had even begun was against the Gerudo code. Turning towards checking the energy output, Somnambula tapped a few cables, causing them to unleash small doses of electricity. She then went on to check a pipe where the electrical energy Naboris relied on for shooting thunder from its humps traveled through and noticed that it needed to be adjusted to allow for a better flow. Knowing she lacked actual tools, she chose to use her sword instead by hitting the pipe with the hilt of her blade. In her mind, Naboris was unlike anything she had ever seen before. Had she not seen it with her own eyes, she would have been utterly skeptical towards it ever existing. Suddenly, she felt a strange presence coming from behind her and quickly looked back to see what it was. There was nothing, so she assumed it was the wind, a reminder that nightfall was approaching and that it would get cold pretty quickly. Somnambula resumed checking the output, hitting the pipe a few more times, only to stop a second time upon feeling the same presence as before. Shrugging off the notion, she was about to wrap up her work when she suddenly turned her sword around, gripped it firmly in her hand, and breathed heavily before addressing what she knew was there.
I didn't think anyone could sneak up on me, yet you did.
Begin, those chosen by the planet.
You possess a strong reaction. Though you gave yourself away with that aura of yours. A testament to my power. I don't know why you bothered to come all the way up here, nor do I even care, since you'll be leaving the same way you got here.
Somnambula said.
This place is too dangerous for anyone who doesn't understand how this ancient machine functions. You mean the divine beast Vonaboris, correct?
Somnambula stood in horror upon hearing the person behind her say that.
How did you know that? All people of this world know what the divine beasts are, Urbosa, champion of the Gerudo. What they do not know is that these creatures possess an ancient power that has been forgotten by everyone aside from the Sheikah, their creators, and who have since been driven into the very shadows by those they once served. Such power was based on the Triforce, the golden power that can grant one's deepest desire, yet it could never be truly replicated. There's no proof of that. Because you and the people do not understand the true nature of the beasts.
Somnambula whipped around to confront her visitor and her jaw dropped.
That armor. It looks similar to the Gerudo armor that the soldiers of Gerudo town wear, but yours looks more ancient, as though it isn't from this time. Yes. Your armor is ancient Gerudo armor, worn by Gerudo kings upon their ascension, but it hasn't existed in over 10,000 years.
No way. There's no way it was possible. I looked up from the pages and shook my head in disbelief. How could he be there? How could Ganondorf be there before Urbosa? I thought his primal form, Calamity Ganon, still resided below Hyrule Castle where it had been for eons. Unless this was some kind of illusion both Urbosa and I were having, she had indeed been confronted by the Dark Lord himself, the same one who had been tormenting me this whole time in a bid to make me his servant. I wanted to close the Hyrule Historia and stop reading, but I had to keep going in order to find out what would happen.
And yet it does through me. You're definitely a male Gerudo, but how is that possible?
Somnambula asked.
There hasn't been a male born into the tribe for 30 years, so what does that make you? I know you have an answer and I demand you tell me. The answer is most obvious yet you cannot see it. Who are you? My name is Ganondorf and I was once the Gerudo king of thieves.
Somnambula was stunned to say the least.
What? Ganondorf? Impossible. He was an ancient Gerudo king who lived over 10,000 years ago, but he brought nothing but shame to our tribe, which is why his history has been largely forgotten, save for those who studied our tribe's past.
She then began laughing before lowering her sword.
I see what this is now. You're nothing but a pretender, a fraud wanting me to believe that you are most notorious of the Gerudo. I'll give you props for finding that ancient armor and the details across your body, such as the jewel on your forehead, is pretty faithful, but you're not him.
Ganondorf laughed this time.
How amusing to see that the Gerudo have been reduced to such ignorance. What did you say?
Somnambula asked as she stopped laughing.
I would not doubt my claims, Urbosa. Don't tempt me into doing something I'll regret. Yes. I can see it all too clearly now.
Ganondorf said.
Your appearance and mannerisms are almost identical to that of Nebaru. Yes, you happen to be her descendant, as the spiritual energy emanating from you is strong, stronger than most who exist in this world. Nebaru was once my second in command but betrayed me when she concluded that she could never be ruthless like her kin were under my reign. Knowing of her treachery, I commanded my surrogate mothers to deal with her so that she would remember what her place was, but destiny had its own plans and she became one of the 6 sages.
Somnambula was stunned again.
How? How did you know I was related to the legendary Nebaru?
Ganondorf laughed.
Because you possess her very spiritual energy. You also possess a necklace that you wear around your neck which once belonged to Nebaru but has been passed down from generation to generation. It was a trinket that I gave to her on the day I chose her to become my second in command. You may wear it with pride, but know that she received it by obeying my every command without question.
Somnambula clutched the trinket around her neck and held it firmly as Ganondorf continued laughing.
How does it feel knowing you wear such shame, Urbosa? That was just a coincidence, you knew about that.
Clenching his hand into a fist, the mark of the Triforce appeared on the back of Ganondorf's hand.
Perhaps this will be the final proof. You need to know that I am the one who once conquered this kingdom and plunged into darkness. Only the royal family of Hyrule possess marks like that.
Somnambula said.
Which means that you are who you say you are, even though I cannot accept it. Tell me, why have you decided to reveal yourself to me now? You could have done so a long time ago or to someone else amongst our tribe. All will become clear in time. I'll make you explain yourself.
Holding out his hand, Ganondorf concentrated and a scabbard materialized into said hand before he grabbed the hilt with his other hand and pulled out the very sword that was used to execute him in the timeline where he was arrested for his crimes. Knowing that she had to fight, Somnambula raised her sword, removed a shield from behind her back, and slung it onto her back before dashing forward. She then swung her sword in hopes of scoring an early blow only for Ganondorf to parry the blow with his own sword, but she was surprised at how fast he reacted to her move as though he knew what she would do before she did. Swinging her sword again, Somnambula sought to move faster in hopes of catching him off guard, but he kept on parrying each blow, forcing her to come up with another plan. She didn't expect to find someone who could match her skills, but she felt there was something strange about her opponent. To her, Ganondorf wasn't trying his best, and this bothered her because he was holding back on his power. A warrior knew when their opponents weren't being serious, and he was definitely doing that. She had to act quickly before Ganondorf would choose to take their fight more seriously and unleash what he could really do. An idea then popped into her head. She then threw her shield forward thinking it would cause him to deflect it, but was shocked when he caught it with his hand before flinging it back, where she got knocked to the ground as a result from the force behind his throw. Getting back up, Somnambula decided not to try that idea again, but she did learn something in the process. Ganondorf was holding back, as she would have been killed had he been more serious. Raising her shield and walking forward slowly, she swung her sword only to be parried, so she swung again with the same result happening again. Somnambula and Ganondorf then began parrying one another in a bid to see who would overpower the other first. This went on for a while before the two disengaged from their parrying, though Somnambula was exhausted. She was the strongest warrior among the Gerudo yet was quickly realizing that Ganondorf was even stronger. It was because he had lived for countless centuries and during that time had earned tremendous experience of varying levels. Somnambula also knew if she was defeated, nothing could stop him from going to Gerudo town and plunging it into darkness, or worse, slaughter everyone who opposed him. She had to end this battle before that could come to pass. Charging forward, she used her beautiful dancing battle style before leaping over Ganondorf, but when she turned around upon landing, she was shocked to find that he had disappeared without a trace. Had victory been achieved? No, she didn't think so, as she could still sense his presence. Stepping forward cautiously, Somnambula suddenly felt a sharp pain brushing against her neck and was surprised to see that Ganondorf's sword a mere inch from her throat. How had he been able to get that close without her knowing, despite his presence being felt everywhere on the divine beast? It was right there that she concluded that he had been manipulating her the entire time.
Heh. Didn't think a Vi like you could possess such skill. I must admit that I've never been pushed this far before, but don't think you've beaten me. Your words are pitiful as they hide the truth. Yeah. I realize that you're stronger than I am, so why hold back? Because you are not worth the effort. What?
Ganondorf laughed.
I wanted to see if the strength of the Gerudo still exists even now, so I tested you to see if you were a true Gerudo warrior. It seems that you have already reached your full potential. How unfortunate you didn't meet my expectations.
Somnambula gave him a confused look and he once again laughed.
Are you truly that surprised by my words? Then know this, Urbosa. You and your companions have been preparing for the return of a primal beast, the creature called Ganon. What about it? You already know the answer. I do not follow. Give it a moment and it will come to you. No.
Somnambula said softly.
Are you saying that you and Calamity Ganon are one and the same?
Ganondorf laughed again.
That creature is an incarnation of my very being, though it has become nothing more than a mindless beast. You will soon come to the realization that your efforts will amount to nothing, though why should I reveal such details? It would be more interesting for you to experience what fate has chosen to inflict upon you and those who have been chosen to fight against this primitive form of my hatred. Even if you understand the meaning behind my words, it does not change anything. Then perhaps I should do just that.
Somnambula said. She put away her sword and snapped her finger, causing a bolt of lightning to strike Ganondorf. The Dark Lord groaned upon getting hit, but before he could react accordingly, she snapped her finger again, causing another bolt to hit him.
What do you think of my special power, Urbosa's Fury? Ah! The Thunder Helm!
Ganondorf said as he clutched his chest.
To think that such a powerful artifact would fall into your hands. I know that you feel inferior when compared to the other champions, as their powers are natural while yours is artificial, an unfortunate twist in the proverbial fires of fate.
Her face taking on an expression of anger, Somnambula continued to snap her finger, sending bolt after bolt of lightning down upon Ganondorf. At first it looked as though they weren't having any kind of effect, but he was quickly showing signs of fatigue resulting from being shocked with over 10,000 volts. Eventually, he would drop to one knee, and when he tried to get back up, one final snap of a finger sent down a massive thunderbolt, striking him, and he collapsed to the ground. Drawing out her sword again, Somnambula waited until Ganondorf got up onto his knee before aiming her blade straight at his throat.
If I take your life, Calamity Ganon will have never existed since you two are one and the same. You would take the life of a fellow Gerudo.
Somnambula nodded.
You're not one of us. You are a demon whose very existence has pervaded this land for countless ages. By taking your life, history will forever be changed and peace will reign supreme for all time. I don't care if no one realizes what I do here today so long as they are able to live in peace.
Pulling her sword back, she thrust it forward in an attempt to kill Ganondorf only for him to suddenly catch her blade with his hand. Laughing, he got back up onto his feet, lifting her up off the ground in the process, and with a slight bit of pressure from his hand, her sword cracked.
Did you honestly believe that you had the means to oppose me? While the Thunder Helm is a magical artifact, its power is not enough to defeat me. How unfortunate for you, Urbosa.
Putting his sword away whilst still laughing, Ganondorf thrust out his own hand and a ball of dark energy began forming, increasing in size until it covered his entire palm. Without warning, he released it, and it blasted Somnambula in the stomach, causing her to get sent flying off the side of Divine Beast Von Oberus.
Ahhhhhhhhhh.
It looked like she would die, but luckily, she managed to grab the ladder Sassy Saddles had used to climb down, though she was now completely at Ganondorf's mercy.
Pathetic fool. Finish me.
Somnambula said as she struggled to hold on.
But know that you kill me here and now, the Gerudo will hunt you down for all eternity to avenge me. You may be powerful, but there's no way you can fight them all at once. I have no desire to kill you. Afraid to do it, Ganondorf?
Ganondorf laughed once more.
As I said to you, fate has already determined what shall happen, and who am I to stop that from happening? You are strong, Urbosa, but you lack the true power one needs to subjugate the land under their dominion. A shame that the Gerudo have become weak over the ages. Had they chosen not to forge ties with the Hylians, they would have been the masters of this world. I see that your arrogance is strong. And yet you are the one on the verge of death. A fall from this height wouldn't kill me,
Somnambula said.
Besides, you should feel honored that I'll forever remember this encounter. It's not every day that I get to fight someone with your skill who also doubles as an ancient from a different period in time.
Ganondorf shook his head.
It is unfortunate that you shall not remember any of this. When you fall from this height and hit the ground, your people will think you slipped off of this ancient creature, though you not recall the events leading up to it. I know that the royal family has the means to traverse through time as a result of their attempts at trying to understand the true nature of the Triforce, and if they were to sense my presence, they would strive towards attempting to change history, something I cannot allow. I know you believe my presence changes history, but it does not, as my power is beyond their understanding.
Clenching his hand into a fist, the mark of the Triforce appeared on Ganondorf's hand and began to glow. Moments later, he unleashed a powerful dark magic that enveloped around the head of Somnambula, causing her to feel dizzy. She struggled to maintain her focus but ultimately released her grip on the ladder, dropping down to the ground below, her memories of her encounter with the Dark Lord fading away. Upon seeing her crash, Ganondorf laughed as he disappeared into darkness, leaving no trace of him having ever been there, the divine beast crying out in anguish over what had transpired. End, those chosen by the planet. By the time the Gerudo found her laying unconscious in the desert by Naboris, Urbosa had completely forgotten about her encounter with Ganondorf, and believed that she had indeed fallen from a great height. Fortunately, the deep sand broke her fall, and so she suffered from a few bruised ribs before recovering fully. Upon her recovery, she left for Hyrule Castle days later to meet with Princess Zelda and the other champions to discuss further preparations regarding Calamity Ganon. Zelda revealed that she had been forbidden by her father to perform further research on the ancient machines until she had awakened her divine powers. In order to awaken her power, Zelda had to visit 3 sacred springs, each one representing a Triforce essence, and prayed at each one, though she failed at each attempt and became frustrated over how nothing happened. Despite these unfortunate setbacks, she remained hopeful that she could awaken the power that had been passed down through her family. Always by her side was the 5th champion, Link, he who had been chosen to wield the Master Sword, to protect her from harm. When she revealed to the champions of her failures, they began formulating a means of unlocking her power only to suddenly be spurned into action. Calamity Ganon, who had remained dormant for 10,000 years, awakened and was poised to plunge Hyrule into darkness. It says that it was Daruk who commanded the champions to get into their divine beasts and for Link to prepare for his eventual assault on Hyrule Castle where Ganon was located. What should have been a decisive victory turned into complete horror when something completely unexpected happened. Knowing that the divine beasts and the guardians would be a threat to him, Ganon used his malice to infect each one of the ancient machines, turning them against the kingdom. The champions were killed by 4 essences that were an extension of Ganon himself. A footnote here referred to them as blights of water, fire, wind, and thunder, while King Roam along with everyone in Hyrule Castle and the surrounding town lost their lives against the Guardians. Link, the 5th champion, was said to have succumbed to his injuries he sustained when protecting Zelda from a group of Guardians, though some claim he survived. As for Princess Zelda herself, her fate remained unknown, though again, some claim that she was still alive. This event became known as the Great Calamity, which devastated Hyrule, and the kingdom had since struggled to repair itself. There was one other casualty, though this occurred before and after the Great Calamity made itself known. The Hylians blamed the Sheikah for building the Guardians and Divine Beasts and the devastation that would occur when Ganon possessed the ancient machines, and they were forced to hide out of fear, though this had an unfortunate side effect. Many cast aside their technological advances and chose peaceful lives, but a group defected from the tribe out of hatred towards those who shunned them and became known as the Yiga clan, loyal followers of Ganon, sworn to kill the chosen hero wherever he may be. I closed the book and placed it down on a small table that was in front of my recliner. As much as I wanted to continue reading to find out what happened next, I just couldn't bring myself to continuing. Also, I had read plenty enough already. I had to admit that this new addition to the legend was intriguing, though the fact that historians didn't know where it took place within the timeline was disappointing. It also served to remind me of how Ganondorf continued manipulating people and events to his whim. Were I to end up going on another adventure as a result of his actions in the distant future, I understood his motivations a lot better than before. By the time I came to reading the Hyrule Historia again, would there be any additional new content? If so, then I would like to read about that, as it felt very compelling. For now, I intended on giving Rainbow Dash back her book before taking another nap. Reading so much about the Legend of Zelda's expansive lore really took it out of me, as there was just so much to take in all at once. Would my torment at Ganonder's hands ever end? I didn't know the answer, though I felt that it was going to be a no. I couldn't allow myself to succumb to despair, but it wasn't going to be easy given the mark on my hand serving as a reminder of my connection to him. Hopefully, my friends wouldn't be dragged into this conflict any more than they already were, but again I felt gearing towards no on that front. As for Princess Twilight, I knew she was now part of this conflict, because if she did possess the Triforce of Wisdom, she and I shared an unfortunate bond with Ganondorf. If she didn't, then perhaps he will leave her alone and instead focus on wanting to make me his devoted servant. What I knew more than anything else was that this wasn't the end of my journey, but rather just the beginning. Whenever it happens again, when I next am pulled into this video game world, I've got to be ready for it.